All right. Okay, everyone. It's Aleem here again, and I'm here with one of my private clients, Azan. So, Azan, good to see you, man. It was pleasure working with you, and I was thinking maybe we can start off just by telling the audience how kind of you and I got started to work together.
Yeah, for sure. So Aleem and I have been family friends for a while. He's been friends with my parents. They have their own little group. So I got wind about Aleem's services, the academic coaching that he does, because my brother actually did the same program through him a couple years back when he started university at Waterloo. So I was finding that I was having a little bit of trouble with the adjustment between high school and university, which I'm sure a lot of kids my age have. I'm a second year student, by the way, at UFC. So in first year, I found that I was having a lot of struggles. So I was trying to think of what I could do or who I could come to just figure out a new strategy or a new way to go forward. So then I was talking to my parents about it, and they brought up Aleem. So that's how that whole process got started.
Awesome. So I'm just taking down a few notes here. Um, so what I wanted to know was what kind of struggles did you have? And the reason I'm asking these questions is I think a lot of students may have similar struggles.
Mhm.
And I also want to preface this by saying that um, for you, it was not an intelligence issue. Like for you, you've always done well in high school, right? Like
Yeah.
you always, I'd say just based on our work together, you're at least 85% student around there.
Yeah, yeah. Usually in high school, I had about like mid to low 90s average.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what I thought. So then let me ask you, why would you want to work with me then if you're doing so well in school?
So, I did well in high school, but I don't think I ever worked or studied or put in like maximal effort to achieve the results. I think I got into a really unhealthy pattern of doing the minimum amount of work, but then getting exponential results kind of thing, which I'm sure a lot of kids get used to in some high school situations because it is a little bit it's easy to like just circumvent your way through the system and kind of just like fake it till you make it in high school, and it works. But that's a really self-destructive habit to get into once you're in university, and that's what I found, because in high school I would do the minimum amount of work and I would get like really good results, but in university I'm doing, like, in my mind I was doing the maximum amount of work. I put in all this time, all this energy, all this effort, and my results were average, if not subpar.
Yeah, and the reason I asked you that question is because that's exactly why I do what I do. Because a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I can just go get a tutor, or I can just go get someone to teach me the course," but that's actually not what I do. Um, and what I try to do is actually teach you how to use your mind better. And so that's why I think you and I hit it off, because that's actually why you wanted to work with me, right? Like you knew that the effort was not translating into the success, even though you had success in high school. But
Mhm.
what was really interesting is that even though your grades were pretty good, especially for university, what kind of stress were you having, and what kind of pressure were you feeling and stuff when you were in university, and how did that kind of come up?
Well, for me, it's just because I don't want to just like cap it off at an undergrad. Like, I'm not doing a type of program where I can have a job straight out of university. I'm in the faculty of kinesiology, doing a bachelor's of science in kines. And hopefully, my aim is to one day go to physiotherapy or medicine or something in a healthcare sports med field. So for me, C's get degrees doesn't work. I have to do good. So I have that added pressure on myself that if you don't do good, all these doors are going to close on you and you're not going to have anywhere to go in the future, kind of thing. So for me, it's just that pressure that I'm putting on myself to really achieve all that I can academically, just because a lot of the times it's that number that opens the door for you. Like extracurricularly, you can have the most impressive CV ever. But if you don't have that number, that's the thing that's going to be holding you back. So that's the one thing that I was really missing. And for me, I didn't do bad in first year. I think I had about a 3.5, 3.6 GPA. It just wasn't as good as I wanted it to be to reach that standard of excellence that I'm trying to go for. So for me, it was just that feeling of stress was kind of just like a helpless kind of stress, because I wasn't really sure what I was doing wrong. And then I was starting to think, what if it's a problem with me? What if it's a problem in the way that I study? Is it an intelligence problem? And then every time you start to see a dip in performance like that, I think everybody inevitably goes down that same path. But for me, it was really self-destructive, and I always found myself getting behind in all my work, and then always having to just like fight and fight to catch up. And there would be tons of nights where I would just pull all-nighters to work on a lab or an assignment and stuff like that. And in the end, it worked, and I achieved good results, just not great results that I knew I could have achieved if I had performed academically to my maximum capacity from the start, rather than trying to always catch up and play that catch up game.
Yeah. So what kind of results did you get after we kind of worked together? Like I obviously you reported back to me and every week you would kind of give me your updates and I would kind of, help you through these challenges. But maybe you could explain in terms of how did you actually benefit and what kind of results are you expecting or what kind of results are you getting right now? I think that's also good to talk about.
So I actually just finished all my midterms a couple days ago. I had my last one and got the marks immediately, and I was super super pleased with all of my results because they're higher than I've ever got on most tests in my life. Actually, not even just like university midterms. So I achieved A's and A pluses in every single midterm. I never got anything below that, and right now, class average wise, um, I'm sticking right at the top at the moment, and I'm really, really happy with that because I've definitely noticed a change in the way that I apply myself and the way that I manage my time. Because when you and I first started, my main issue that I had that I was coming to you for was exam performance, because I always did good on projects and assignments and I was able to get my way through those. But for exams, it was always kind of that one challenge that I couldn't really like circumvent. So seeing the big jump in my academic performance in terms of exams over the past couple of weeks and over this past semester in general has just been huge for me because I never had that before. So it's just that extra nudge I needed in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the interesting part. So what do you think the thing was that made you perform better? Like what was the thing that got you to over that hump?
I think it was just like the two key things that we talked about was time management. We talked about that a lot. We talked about how to plan and schedule things out. You gave me different templates and different strategies to organize when I would do this task, when I would do that task. We also talked about speed of implementation, which I think is really, really huge and something that a lot of high school students watching this or early university students should just get into right away. So that is starting an assignment or a project as soon as it's given to you when that information is still fresh in your head, rather than getting it during lecture, understanding it in the moment, and then leaving it for a week and then trying to do it without having that knowledge anymore. So that was a really huge thing for me. So like really tackling all my tasks as soon as I get them rather than trying to put it off. So just like little things like that, like just organizationally, and a huge confidence thing too, honestly, because at that point where I started seeing you, I had confidence in my intelligence, but I didn't have confidence in my ability to express that intelligence.
That's nicely said. Nicely said. So um, this is something that I think is really not taught anywhere, and that is the whole concept of um, the whole externalization concept, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of individuals out there that are brilliant, that are very, very intelligent. The problem is they cannot always explain or articulate themselves well.
Mhm.
So when we talked about this whole concept, um, one of the things that I think is very important that a lot of students are not aware of is that they spend so much time putting stuff in their mind, but very little time communicating what's in their mind, right? And then what happens is on an exam, it's for the first time ever are they communicating something that's in their mind for the first time. And then they don't do well because it's the first time they're trying to explain it. And so how did you deal with that? Like how did first of all, is that something you experienced?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. So for me, it was like thinking back to first year, the way I prepare for an exam was I would take like just a week before the exam, I would start studying for it, maybe even less than a week sometimes when I got really, really busy. And I would just go through all the lecture slides or I'd read through my textbook and I'd just write cue cards the entire time. I'd write cue cards about this, cue cards about that. And at the end, I'd have like a deck of cue cards, probably this big, with the whole content for the exam on it. And I'd have written all that out and I'd have read all of it, but I didn't understand any of it. And I didn't know how to make others understand it if I was trying to explain it to them. So that was a big thing that you and I talked about. So the difference between internalization and externalization, and why a balance of both is what you need to really get good performance on an exam. So for me, the way that I was studying before, I was just purely internalizing information. I would read something over and over again. I would write down a definition. I would look at this and that. And I kind of just depended on recall during an exam. So if I saw a word, I'd be like, oh, okay, you saw this. And I'd literally try to just like picture my cue card, and I try to like picture the definition, which was also something that was really self-destructive for me because I wasn't studying to learn. I was studying to scrape by and pass. So as
Mm,
soon as the exam was over, all that information would just be gone from my head because I
yeah.
was just trying to remember like the actual physical words, and but I wasn't actually understanding them and I wasn't learning how to communicate those ideas. So what we talked about was how to really take the information that I've internalized and then flip it around and externalize it. So that could be in the form of just talking it out to myself or discussing it with friends and stuff like that. Like just being able to really communicate what I know about a certain topic so that when I see it on an exam, I'm not having to communicate it for the first time. Like if I get a short answer question about some topic, I won't be like thinking in my head, oh, okay, what was that all about? What was this? What was that? And I won't be communicating it for the first time because I've already talked about it with myself before and I've already gone through those motions of understanding with it.
Yeah, and I think that's critical because one of the things that, and I think for those who are watching right now, one of the things, if you're gonna write something down, I think you got to write this down, and that is that you're never tested on what's in your mind. Like you're never tested on how much you know, right? And a lot of students don't understand that. You're never tested on how much you know. You're always tested on how well you can articulate what you know.
Exactly.
And not only that, but even the stuff that you know, a lot of students have trouble with that because some of the information that they know is actually not valuable,
Hmm.
right? So they'll go in, they'll try to learn it all, but they don't even know if that's going to even be on the test. So there's that whole piece that's missing too, right? Like you actually have to go into the class and filter what's valuable, what's not, put that in your head, and then practice actually explaining it.
Yeah.
And again, this is not taught in any school that I've ever been to, and I've I've got 3 degrees, so I've been to a lot of schools, and it's never taught. What's usually taught is the content itself, and it's for us to figure out how to do it,
Yeah.
right? So I think if you grasp the content, you'll do well on the test, but it doesn't work that way because you actually have to practice communicating that content. So that's good. So what kind of things would you um, recommend? Like for, let's say there's a student who's in their first year right now or second year, and they got to make that transition over to high school. Is
Yeah.
there anything you'd recommend to them on what they can do? Or, and I know I'm asking you all these things on the spur of the moment, but
Yeah.
I find these to be quite good because then you can kind of give what your gut tells you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'd say for any students that are in high school right now and are making that transition into first year university or from like first year to second year, like I just was, I would say one key thing for me, never doubt yourself and never doubt your intelligence. Cause just like I talked about with Aleem, for me, it wasn't an intelligence problem. It was just how I used that intelligence and how I better articulated that intelligence. So the one thing I would say would just don't get caught on that self-destructive path of just being like, oh, it's something wrong with me. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, this and that. Because once you get started on that path, for me, I did get on that path for a little bit, for about a month during my first like midterm and final season, like in that little period in between. I was just so unmotivated to do any of my work because I was thinking to myself, I'm like putting in so many hours, I'm doing this and that, and I'm still not performing at the same level as some of my peers or at the level that I need to be to get where I want to go. So what's the point kind of thing? And then your whole like confidence just drops down. And confidence is the number one most important thing for me anyways. That was huge for me, like having that confidence in myself and even the confidence to like just reach out to Aleem and start talking about how to change my strategies and change my mindset on learning. Because if you start doubting yourself and start losing that confidence, then you're just going to be fighting an uphill battle all the way. You got to always believe in yourself and believe in your intelligence. And you have to know that this is something that a lot of students go through. Like I've gone through it. I never thought I would go through something like this. I was just assuming that the transition from high school to university would be seamless because I always did good in high school. So I was like, why wouldn't I be able to do good in university? But that's not how it works.
Yeah, yeah. It's really important because um, confidence. I mean, you nailed it, and that is it's one of the most valuable things. Now, what's interesting is people will say, yeah, confidence is important, but now I'm actually going to explain why it's important. So just if you're watching, hopefully you'll understand why it's so important. Is because we talk about this whole concept on mindset, right? Like we talk about your mind is pretty much the engine of who you are, right? The problem is that your emotions are like the fuel of the engine. So what happens is if you have a lot of self-doubt, if you have a lot of worry, if you have a lot of fear, then you're actually putting really, like, you might not even be putting the right fuel into your mind. So what happens is it cannot function well. But when you're confident and you're exhibiting the correct emotions and you have that drive and that passion, you'll notice that your ideas and your ability to be creative and innovative, they just go up, right? And when they go up, all of a sudden you do better. And so we think, yeah, the person's really brilliant, the person's really smart. That's true. But the confidence and the emotions that they had prior to it is what the factors were that contributed to their brain functioning at a higher level. So then my question to you is that, you know, um, just if I compared myself to you when I was in university, I would look at you and I would say, Azan is just naturally a bright guy. Like Azan is just brilliant, right? And there's no way I can ever be like that. Okay. Now that was me probably back when I was 18, 19. And next thing I know, I'm getting grades and I'm getting scholarships and bursaries and 3 degrees and I got a 4.0. Now, what would you explain? Like, how would you explain to someone that how this is possible? Like, and somebody comes and tells you, Azan, you're really brilliant, you're really smart, and they're not doing as well as you. How can you get them and what would you say to them to help them see that, look, where they're at right now is just temporary?
Mhm.
Like, what would you do? And like, what would be your, I guess, your discussion that you would have with them to help them see that they can do much better?
I'd honestly probably just say to them, first of all, that it doesn't have anything to do with how smart I am or how smart you are, because it's nothing to do with the intelligence that we each have. It's just the way that we articulate what's in our head, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I would probably say to them, the first thing you want to look at is your mindset, which is something that a lot of people don't really understand. Because when people come to you asking for stuff like that, they generally think that they're looking for, you generally think that they're looking for study strategies, or like they're asking, like, how do you study? Like, what do you do to get ready for exams? Like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And they try to like emulate themselves after that pattern, which is kind of what I thought that I would be getting from you. Honestly, when I came in, I thought it would be like different like study strategies and like different ways of like note taking and stuff like that. Like that's kind of what I was expecting, which is why when we actually started, I was a little bit taken aback, because the first thing we started talking about was, what do you want out of life? Like, what's your picture, kind of thing. And then after that, we started talking about what makes success, like the equation for success. We talked about confidence a lot, because that was something that I may have been lacking in myself to really exude that information. So I'd probably just take that same approach with somebody else, and I'd be like, I don't want you to think that it's an intelligence problem, because it's not. It's just the way that you're working. So you have to work smarter, not harder. That's the big thing you told me all the time. Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. And
So
you
that
know,
was a good one.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, that's all. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah. I think you said something really interesting, and that is when we did meet, I actually never, you're right. Like, I never actually told you what to do. In fact, I spent more time trying to understand who you were, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And so a lot of people, they're like, um, why would he do that? Why doesn't he just give me the strategies? And there is a reason for that. And that is because each one of us is built differently. Like your way of learning, your way of interpreting the world, your way of seeing things, your way of dealing with situations is very different from the way I would do it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And in my opinion, you're probably a lot more mature and more intelligent than I was at your age. But the point is that if I told you what works for me, that's like putting like an engine into a different car. It,
Yeah. It
the
won't work for
circuitry,
me too. Yeah. You have to
yeah,
have a different tailored approach for every single person. Yeah.
yeah, like the circuitry is not there,
Mhm.
right? So what people need to understand is that, and I think this is where a lot of schools maybe have trouble in, is that they give students a generic approach and they're like, here, learn this.
Yeah.
But the problem is that it's like, imagine giving somebody a generic engine and saying, okay, now put this in your car and now drive. Well, some cars, maybe they can make it work. Some that'll work really good, and
Yeah.
some it won't even work. And
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
not because there's anything wrong with the car, is because the way the mind is, it just works differently for each person, right?
Mhm.
So that's actually a really good pickup. So I think one of the best things to understand if you're a student and you're struggling, or let's say you're doing well, but you're just not getting the grades that you want, I
Mhm.
think it's just to understand that you're built differently. And what you got to do is, instead of looking outside for help, you got to start looking inside and seeing
Yeah.
how you work.
Yeah.
right? And I think that makes all the difference. And I think that's what we did, right?
Yeah,
We spent
exactly.
a lot of time
Exactly.
just going inside and looking at what you were doing, and then we tweaked it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's actually really important to mention. And then I wanted to ask you something else as well. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was that, um, there's a lot of people that, they really pride themselves on, working hard, right? They always say, to succeed, you just gotta like work hard and be the hardest working person out there.
Yeah.
And that's actually not something I agree with. And as a result of that, a lot of people, they get frustrated with me. They're like, what do you mean? That's something you got to do. So it's very hard for me to explain to them that if you're working really hard at something, you're probably not going to achieve that goal. Or even if you do achieve it, you're probably not going to do a good job at it.
Mhm.
Right. So how would you explain that to someone, like based on what we talked about?
I would just say like kind of the same thing we talked about before, like working smarter instead of working harder. Like it's fine to work hard and to put like a ton of effort into something, but you have to make sure that you're putting that effort into the right aspect to achieve success. Like, for example, if we're thinking about like a final that you have, like you're writing a final and you have like 10 chapters on this final kind of thing, right? So if you know, like if your profs told you, if they've hinted during lecture that like chapters 1 to 5 are going to be more important than chapters 6 to 10, and you spend all your time evenly studying for every single chapter, you're automatically putting yourself at a disadvantage. You may have been working hard to study for all of those chapters, but if you spend more time on the key information and if you really target what's going to get you that success, you can work hard, but you can also work smarter. So you work a little bit of less on those 5 chapters, but you work a little bit more on those 5 chapters. So in the end, you are still working hard, but you're working hard to make change that matters rather than just working hard at a big overall picture, which may not give you the outcome that you want.
Yeah. So as a really good example, like you said, let's say there's 10 chapters on an exam, right? If you understand, and this is another concept that we talked about filtering, right? Going to the class and listening and filtering properly. If you have figured out that a lot of the potential exam questions, and you can, like I said, you can also figure this out while you're in class. The problem is most students, when they're in class, they're doing something very different. But if they're in class and they can figure out what's valuable, then all of a sudden, when they start working hard, as we say, they're working hard only in the right areas. So they do much better than those working hard in the wrong areas. So I think the key here is that if you look at the overall amount of effort put in, the overall amount of effort is actually less when you know what to focus on.
Exactly. Yeah. Because if you don't know what to focus on, you're just going to be like throwing that hard work at all the content.
Yeah.
Not going to know what to tackle kind of thing. So hard work is fine, but it has to also be precise work. Precision is key.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that word. And I think you mentioned that before, and that's the part where I think we miss, right? And that is just be like a bulldozer and just work hard at everything.
Yeah,
And that's a recipe for disaster. And
exactly.
that's the one switch that had to go off in my mind,
Mhm.
because I always prided myself on working hard because I never thought I was an intelligent person. And then all of a sudden I realized, why would I work hard at that when I know for a fact that's not going to be on the exam?
Mhm.
And then I better work hard at the other thing. And that's the switch that a lot of the smart students, they naturally possess. And in order to get that, you actually have to listen in a very different way,
Mhm.
right? So how would you recommend somebody to actually figure out what's valuable and what's not valuable?
I would just say like for me, it was just like a matter of priority. Like I just had like this like moment of clarity. One time I was studying for a physiology exam and I was just like writing out some cue cards and I was like going through it and I was just like I was exhausted because I'd been like studying for this midterm like the past like 2 days kind of thing. And I was just like going through the motions. I was watching my lecture. I was just writing down exactly what my prof was saying, like word for word. And then I just thought to myself, like I paused the video and I was like, what's the point of this? Like I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm just watching a video, writing down words. I'm not understanding. I'm not paying attention. My mind is somewhere else. And that was the result of me just doing that bulldozer work that you talked about. Like it was just me trying to tackle everything all at once without having a focus. And then when I actually got to the exam, I had no idea what I was doing
Yeah.
because yeah, I'd see like, oh, like yeah, I saw that word. That seems familiar, but I would have no context to put it back to. I would have no information behind it. So I feel like there's not like one particular way to just kind of like have that moment by yourself kind of thing. But for me, I had that moment just by studying, because I was like, this is pointless. Like,
Yeah.
why would I study on all this information and not even like have time to look at the practice questions that she's made us or the study guides that she's made us? Like, instead of spending
Which are
all of
way
my
more, right? And those practice questions, and those are way more valuable.
so more valuable, because like some of those practice questions are even the questions on the exam. So
Exactly.
that's free marks, and I wasn't taking it because I just wanted to like have that overall approach, and I wanted to be that person that's like, oh yeah, I worked hard. I
Yeah.
did notes for all the chapters. I wanted to like come to school and have my like deck full of cue cards to all my friends and be like, look at all the work that I did, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's so true. And I think we pride ourselves on this whole concept. Hard work means we're good people, right?
Mhm.
Hard work means we're awesome people. That's great until the results don't come,
Exactly.
right? And then when the results don't come, yeah, it can be a good person, but no one's going to want to look at you or hire you if you don't get the results. So
Mhm.
I always believe that, before you do any sort of hard work, have the right definition of what you want to achieve, and that's what you and I spend time on. And then we got to clear up the thinking, and don't equate success to hard work, because it's not always about hard work. It's actually about you maybe using even better resources than you have, right? It could even be by having a 5-minute discussion with a prof
Yeah.
that can tell you what to focus on an exam. And that 5 minute that you have, that 5 minutes you spend with the prof will save you hours and hours of studying. But because of that discussion, you now know what to focus on, right? So this is
Exactly.
exactly what we're trying to say, that don't actually think that if you work hard, you're going to do well.
Mhm.
You got to actually be very intelligent and good with your time. So yeah, so these are the main concepts. Um, so I think we're pretty much done. But Azan, if you wanted to just touch on anything, or if you wanted to maybe give some suggestions to any students that are watching, feel free. What would you say to them?
I would just say honestly, just don't give up. Keep on working at the way that you're learning. Try not to conform to that kind of cookie cutter mentality that Alim was talking about before, that a lot of high schools and mid schools will like put you into in the way of learning. And same thing I said before, just never ever doubt that it's anything to do with your intelligence, because it never will be anything with your intelligence. It might be something with your time management, like it was for me, or with your organization, also like it was for me. But the minute you start doubting your intelligence is when you start going on that downhill slope.
Yeah,
So if you start to feel like you are kind of trapped in that cycle of always trying to catch up with this and that, and always trying to stay at level with all your peers, and you find that you're working yourself a lot harder and you're getting more drained and exhausted, know in your head and just know within yourself that you need to make a change. Because doing that for like a full, like in my case, like if I had to do that for 4 years university, if I never reached out and had the confidence to contact Aleem or like talk to my parents about the struggles I was having, it would have just been like a whole snowball effect. My results would have kept on going down and down, and my mental health, emotional health would have just kept on deteriorating past where it was at that point where I was really struggling at school. So don't ignore the signs, because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we put a lot of pressure on our performance, especially in education. And it's really, really important that you take the time to invest in yourself and change the way that you think, which is what I did with Aleem. So I would say to anybody watching, take the time, think about what you're doing right now, if it's working for you, and think about how you feel too, and how you feel emotionally, how you feel physically, just with the way that you conduct yourself in studies, kind of thing. And if you see any discrepancies, if you see any warning signs, it's just don't ignore them like I did for a little while, because I knew along the way that I was heading down a sticky slope with the way I was working, but I kept on just being like, no, it's fine. I'll catch up eventually. No, it's fine. I'll do good. But in the end, it didn't work out like that. You can't always be hoping for that ideal situation. And I hope for a lot of you that you don't have to go down the same path that I went, where you hope for the ideal situation, but then you get to the finish line and it's not at all what you're expecting.
yeah,
So if you start to see those warning signs, 100% look for help, look for ways to change your mindset, but never doubt your intelligence and never let your confidence go down.
yeah, 100%. And I agree. And I think probably the best analogy, and I touched on it before, is that think of your mind like the engine of a car. Okay. And just realize that if you're feeling stressed out, burnt out, you have fear, you have doubt, you're just putting bad fuel into your engine.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's not going to do anything for you. In fact, it's probably not even going to get you to where you want to go. But if you figure out that you need to put in good fuel, which means that you're more relaxed, you're calm, you have faith in yourself, you have the ability to take time to rest, you'll start to notice that your mind will start to function at a higher level. And then when you work hard from that point, you get much better results. But if you're not actually fueling your mind in the correct way, no amount of hard work is going to help you. So I think that's very, very important. And especially with this, this whole, pandemic situation we're in, mental health is really tough for people. People are emotionally, they're having difficult times. More than ever, you got to figure out how to just feel good and enjoy yourself and be more relaxed and feel more, um, I think, just feel happier, because I think that is what's going to help you perform better in life as well. Would you agree with that, Azan?
100%. You got to make time for the things that make you feel good.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
if you don't feel good, your brain is going to shut down, and then
exactly. Yeah,
then you're in trouble. Awesome. Okay, Azan, good job. I'm just gonna stop it, and we'll talk to you later.
for sure. See you later, man.